So are you relatively new into whiskey and you walk into a liquor store and it just feels like there are 1,000 different brands on the shelf and you just have like decision paralysis on exactly what to buy? Well, today I'm going to talk about what would I buy if I was building a brand new whiskey collection in 2025. Let's go and jump into it. Welcome back to the Bourbon Retriever, and today we're talking about one of the questions that I get asked most by friends and relatives, and it is, what bottles should I go buy? I'm not a big whiskey drinker. I don't really know what to get. What should I go and buy on the shelf to help start my collection? So I have a couple rules on how I'm building out this collection here. First, it has to be something that is typically on the shelf across the nation. It can be relatively easy to get. There's one bottle on this list that doesn't quite fit that category, but I wanted to keep it something where people would just go out, have not spent too much energy and be able to find them. Because when you're relatively new into whiskey, you don't really quite know how the hunting game works. You don't know what day deliveries are. You don't know how your store rewards allocated bottles. And there's just a lot of stuff you need to learn about your local market on how to get those bottles. And when you start, you just don't really have that knowledge. The second rule I have about this list is there are no craft distilleries on this list. Now, there are tons of great craft distilleries out there, but the issue here kind of ties into rule one. They aren't necessarily national, so it's kind of hard for me to give suggestions on which craft distilleries to get because access is going to change based on where you live in the country. The other issue is crafts can be hit or miss. A lot of craft distilleries is really young whiskey, and is also rather expensive. Like a legacy distillery, we can put out a 9-year-old product for about half the cost, if not a third of the cost, what craft distillers are putting out. And when you're just getting out into bourbon and trying to cut your teeth and learn about what all the different flavors there are out there, it's just much more economical to buy 2 or 3 bottles from legacy distilleries to help expand that profile than just buying one craft distillery. However, I'm gonna make a video later on building on this video about how to expand your collection after you get out of this base set, and that's gonna include a couple of craft distilleries. The third rule about this list is it's gonna include no finished whiskeys. There actually is gonna be one finished whiskey on here, but that's, I think, kind of outside the parameters of kind of what I'm thinking about this rule. And it is that most finished whiskeys are, in my opinion, trying to hide not so great whiskey. And really, when I'm trying to make this base set list, we're really just trying to learn what whiskey tastes like before we advance on to flavorings and how the whiskey might develop over time in a finishing barrel. In addition, with finishing barrels, you can go down rabbit holes, and that is a lot more money you can be spending just experimenting on what all those different finishing barrels add to whiskey. And really here we're just trying to concentrate on building out a base layer for those people who are just getting into the game. Okay, now the fourth and final rule on creating this list is that there are no expensive bottles. This is for a couple reasons. One is you may just not appreciate the difference between the value and the more premium bottles. Like for instance, myself, if I bought a shelf stable wine and then also some super duper rare premium wine, I might be able to tell that there is a slight difference between them, but I don't think I would fully appreciate the difference between a $30 bottle and like a $300 bottle of wine. Second, price doesn't always mean better whiskey. There are many whiskeys out there that are 3-4 times the price of bottles on this list, and they do not taste as good. And also, if you are going to spend up on a whiskey, you want to make sure it matches your flavor profile. So with this list here, you're going to get a kind of a broad base of different types of whiskeys. Try these out, see which one you like, and then once you find a distillery or a flavor profile that you like, my recommendation is then go up inside that distillery, because that is when you're gonna get the best bang for your buck. Now lastly, before we jump into the list of bottles here, don't feel like you need to go out and buy every bottle on this list. That can get rather expensive really quick, especially if you're just getting into this. Feel free just to buy 1-2 of them, drink through them, see how you like it, and then next time paycheck runs around next month, in your monthly budget, buy a couple more on this list until you kind of make your way through this list. And then also, I would recommend you buying like maybe 2 of them at a time. That way you can compare each bottle against each other to see if you actually really like it. But don't feel like you need to go and buy every bottle on this list tomorrow. So the first bottle on this list is actually a bottle that I don't own anymore, but I own versions of it, and it is the Knob Creek 9-year small batch. This is a great bottle to learn about those peanut butter Jim Beam notes. I think this is the best entry-level Jim Beam product. I have the 9-year. It is a single barrel. So it is a little bit higher proof. It's a 120, and it's going to be just off profile single barrels of this Knob Creek line. But it's best for you to buy the small batch first to learn what the base product should taste like, and it's also about like half the cost. In addition, you're getting a 9-year age-dated product, which is hard to find for that price in today's age with how just whiskey is going up in price. So you get a 9 age-dated product for that price, you're doing a good job. Also, when you go out to the liquor store, see if you can find 375s of these bottles. That will cut your price drastically on a lot of these. And you also don't need to go through a whole bottle of these to see if you like them or not, because who knows, maybe you'll pop it, drink a couple pours, and just end up hating it. So if you only get half of it in a 375, you prevent that risk of waste. However, I do recommend you to go back to a pour, even if you don't like it on first crack, because in my opinion, whiskey does change after you get a couple of different pours out of there and the air is able to interact with it. So definitely go back to those pours a couple times, maybe a week, 2 later, to see if you still don't like it, because there are many times that I'll go back to a whiskey that I just absolutely hated, and it all of a sudden becomes like one of my favorite pours. Before we get into the next bottle on this list, if you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any content in the future. But I just want to take a moment to pause and thank you guys for watching and subscribing to the channel. At the time of this recording, I am right at 3,000 subs. I could not have done this without you guys. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching, tuning in, subscribing, and supporting me along this journey. It means a lot to me, and I couldn't do it without you guys. The second bottle on this list is a bottle that I actually recently killed. It was on my bottle kill video. You can go check that up here in the corner if you're interested, but it is the Old Forester 100. This is a great bottle from the Old Forester Distillery. You're gonna get a nice oak notes, banana notes. A lot of Old Forester products have this banana note. This also comes in at 100 proof, which is a good proof point for people getting into whiskey. You don't necessarily want high proof whiskey because this is gonna just taste like ethanol. So this is a good entry level proof, but don't let price be a fool in this bottle. This is probably the cheapest bottle on this list and might be one of the best tasting bottles on this list. For $25, this beats tons of other bottles I've put this in blinds with, so don't sleep on this bottle. If you buy any of this bottle on this list just for the value to money, this is definitely the one to go and grab. Because even with my collection of whiskeys here, it is a bottle that I go back to and drink time and time again. Okay, the next bottle on this list is actually a category bottles, and it is also the bottles I'm probably going to get the most hate for, and it is any bottle from the Buffalo Trace Distillery, whether that be Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, blends. If you can just get one of those bottles, I think that is almost a cornerstone step in any collection. But please don't pay secondary for any of these bottles. If you spend enough time in the game, you'll eventually find out these. Don't feel like you have to buy it the first time you see it if it is way over MSRP. Now, my personal favorite of the Buffalo Trace kind of base level products is the Eagle Rare, but it is the most off profile from the rest of them. This one has much more grapey oak notes, much more closer to the stag profile, whereas the Buffalo Trace, the Blanton's, the E.H. Taylor, those are much more like the green apple, light honey. So while I think the Eagle Rare is the one that tastes better and the one I would recommend you to buy, definitely also see if you can get the Buffalo Trace or the Blends or the E.H. Taylor, one of those, because that'll give you an insight to that other whole set of line of Buffalo Trace products. So one of the main reasons I have Buffalo Trace on this list is because it is, for better or worse, one of the most talked about brands in the bourbon community. Everyone from hating on because of how hard it is to get, from other people who just love the profile, to some of the best products allegedly put on the market, from the Pappies to the George C. Staggs of the world. And if you're gonna have an educated conversation with other people in the bourbon community, it's definitely a bottle you're gonna have to try at least once, just so you can be part of those conversations when people are talking about it. So the next bottle is probably the most loved bottle across the whole bourbon community, and it is the Wild Turkey Rare Breed. This is great Kentucky bourbon. Rare Breed is just quintessential Wild Turkey juice. You could also, in theory, substitute Wild Turkey 101. That is definitely a cheaper product than the Rare Breed here. However, I think value for money, Rare Breed is where it's at. It's a little bit more of a refined product. It's an older age-dated product. It's not age-dated, but it's an older blending of juice that goes into the blend. But I highly recommend you buy something from Wild Turkey just because it is such a pillar in the bourbon community, the legacy and history of it. So if you're looking for more of a value buy, no harm in shoving in a Wild Turkey 101, but if you had the choice, I definitely say get Rare Breed for them. So the next bottle on this list is from the new kid on the block, and it is Bardstown Bourbon Company. This one specifically is the wheated mash bill. All the other bourbons so far have been just generic bourbons. They are different mash bills, but this one, the primary secondary grain is wheat. There are other brands that have wheat as the secondary grain. Most famous, you have the Weller lineup. In addition, also Maker's Mark. However, I just don't really like Maker's Mark. It is a nice, fancy, pretty bottle for new people out there. You see the red wax on it and you immediately think it has to be a premium product. It is a bottle that you definitely should go out and try. If you haven't had Maker's Mark, see if you can get it at a bar. However, it just doesn't, I don't like that Maker's Funk, so it's hard for me to tell you to go out there and buy a full bottle of it. Instead, you should definitely buy this bottle. I think this is some of the best wheated bourbon that you can get out there for the price. Another nice thing about this bottle is I think it is the only non-legacy bottle on this list, so it is something just to help mix up the list a little bit here in your collection, to expand a little bit beyond just those legacy bottles. The next bottle on this list is the highest proof whiskey on this list, and don't be too afraid of that, but it is the Jack Daniel's Barrel Proof Rye. This is also the only rye on this list. I know I said this was a bourbon list, but if you are gonna have a collection, I feel like you need to at least have one rye on it, and this one drinks like a bourbon drinker's rye. One thing to be cautious of these bottles though is the proof point. They're anywhere from like the mid 120s up to basically hazmat proof, and when you're getting into whiskey, that is very, very hot. So when you get this bottle, don't be afraid to put over ice, add a ton of water to it, drink it to where you can actually start tasting the flavors. Don't be ashamed in having to do that when you first start. Like me, how I got into whiskey, I drank cocktails, then I drank it over ice, then I had a little bit of water to it until I finally started drinking neat. So don't be afraid to drink it other ways than neat when you first start out. Now this bottle is the most expensive bottle on this list, coming in around $70 for the 750. This is another one that you can find in 375s every now and then, so definitely get one of those if you can. Now some of you are probably hearing Jack Daniel's and immediately are turned off because you're only thinking of Jack, good old number 7 from your college days, and this is nothing like Jack Daniel's good old number 7. A lot of the lower proof, entry-level Jack Daniel's stuff, to be honest, really isn't that good, but these Jack Daniel's single barrel proofs are on another level, and they're really good whiskey, and I definitely recommend you to go out and get one to start your collection. Now the last bottle on this list is a bottle that I struggled with a little bit, but I ultimately added to the list because I think it is kind of a bottle you need to drink as a beginner whiskey, and it is the Woodford Double Oak. It don't have to be the Woodford Double Oak. I just think that's a good one for beginners to get into it because it's a nice low proof point. I think it comes in at like around 90 proof. You get the nice chocolate, coffee, deep, rich notes that you get from double oaks. And you definitely should look to get one double oak in your collection just to know what double oaking does to a whiskey. The double oaking just adds a ton more oak to it, but it's a different oak than aged oak. It's much more sweeter, more thick, almost molasses type sweetness. Now, I personally struggled to add the Woodford Double Oak to the list because I personally don't really like it anymore. I think it's a little too watery, but that proof point is great for beginners. However, if you guys out there think of another double oak that is better to add in this list, let me know, put it in the comments. I thought about 1910, however, I already have Old Forester 100 on the list, so I didn't want to make it too Old Forester heavy, so I went with the Woodford Double Oak instead. So that's my list of bottles that I would buy if I was starting a bourbon collection in 2025. Leave in the comments below on what bottles you would recommend people to buy if they were starting a collection. I would love to start a conversation in the comments of this video because I'm sure there are many bottles that I'm either forgetting or missing. But if you're enjoying this content, before you get out, hit the subscribe button or check out this video. And until next time, cheers.